I feel like camera releases going into the near future here, you know, they're going to become more irrational and illogical and more based on emotional purchases. And I think a lot of the tech heads that have kind of consumed the space are going to go out on the attack and scream and cry because how other people are spending their money. So I think a lot of people are going to have to start coming to terms that they might not be a true artist and photographer. They might just be somebody who gets a boner off a spec sheet. And if that's you, that's totally fine. Like, you know, everybody's okay with you being that. But don't go around screaming saying, oh, this is so dumb. Why would they do this? Why would anybody ever buy this? Like, just keep it to yourself. You know, go print out that spec sheet, get some lotion, handle your business, and then move on. For the rest of us, you know, you'll see throughout this video, this isn't going to be an in-depth review. This is just a first impression of me conversing between a comparison between the Leica Q343 and the Sony. This camera might not be exactly for me. I think Sony's in the right direction. Something that would kind of like really win me over and influence me, but this isn't it. If it did do that, the price isn't a factor for me. I got the new Sony RX1R version 3. A lot of mixed opinions on it already. I did bring a bunch of different cameras, figure out where this new Sony camera is going to be placed amongst its competitors. Those cameras being the Leica Q343, the Leica M11, and the Nikon ZF. Totally different types of cameras, but they all kind of lean towards this, you know, I think it's a luxury to be able to own any of these cameras, really. The Leicas I bought myself, the Nikon ZF, Nikon did give me this camera, and then Sony's loaning me this camera for a week. So think whatever you want to think about whatever I'm about to say. I personally don't give a fuck if you buy any of these cameras, but hopefully this video will help you guys kind of figure out if you're very passionate about photography and you're inspired and excited over cameras like this. I'm hoping I can kind of help explain who's for what and what for who and yada, yada, yada. I don't know. Cameras, more cameras, yay. I only have a week with this new Sony RX1R 3, whatever it's called. I'm gonna try my best to do a fashion shoot with it and take it around. So this video is just gonna be the first impressions pretty much. The big thing around this is gonna be the price point. It's $5,100 in the States. I don't think people realize what's kind of happening with camera pricing right now. I know some people get triggered when politics comes up. The Cheeto Man's tariffs. I know some of the low IQ people believe that tariffs don't affect the consumer, only affects the companies. That's not how it works. Every company, no matter how angelic or evil the company is, they're not going to pay the tariffs. The tariffs get put right back into the pricing of the products, and the consumers have to pay for that. Say if, 1 week Trump is like, oh, there's no more tariffs. There's 0 tariffs moving forward. He's already gone back and forth so much that it's so volatile in the market now. So what companies have to do now is they now have to build in those tariff pricings just in case. Because say if the company launches a camera without tariff pricing and we start putting our pre-orders or shipments get delayed. And then all of a sudden the Cheeto Man goes, oh, on second thought, we're going to bring back the tariffs and then we're going to put it up to 50%. All of a sudden, if those cameras are already, on the ships and on the planes being shipped over to the States, by the time they land into our ports, they start getting hit with the tariffs. So either the companies are going to have to go to the consumer and be like, hey, you're going to have to pay extra after you already pay for the camera, or the company's got to pay for it, and they're not going to do that. If you owned a company, you're not going to do that either. So now I have a feeling what companies are doing is they're building in these tariffs into the price already, which I think explains pretty much all the latest releases that we've gotten this year so far, and I don't think it's going to change at all. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's not fair because, that's just an excuse that the company's doing to make money. Yep. And guess who gave him that excuse to make extra money? So this is the issue. It all comes down to the volatility of the market, though. Trump has made it to where people aren't confident in spending money. And that's why, anyways, I won't go too heavy anyway. Let's talk about the camera. So first impressions for $5,100, the build quality on this does not represent $5,100. That's what's so important about the Leica Q343. When this camera came out, I think it was priced at $65,000 or $7,000, and I think after taxes I paid like $7,000 to $8,000. But the build quality is drastically different between these two. So let's go over some similarities between the new Sony and the Leica Q343. First off, I never had experience with the Sony RX1R version 2, the previous one. In the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can see the Leica Q343 has a macro mode. So right there, you can see how nice and again, luxurious that is almost. You can see the whole focus gear right there kind of shift up, extremely smooth, extremely nice. And then let's look at it on the Sony RX. So when we do that on the Sony, it's just that. It still feels perfectly fine. It feels pretty smooth still. You can see that's our mode dial up there and the flat top right there. Again, you could put like a brass shutter button on there if you want to. You can put a Leica shutter button on there if you want to. Or you can do a cable release, like an old film camera almost. In the top of our Leica Q343, you can see very simple. These fixed cameras are made for photographers. This is the like true digital photographer experience right here. And so the fact all we have is our shutter dial right here. We have this customized dial and button right here. This is where my ISO is set to. And then there's a button on top of here, and this is how I get into my crop modes. On the back of the screen here, you can see we have all the typical like back button layout that Sony kind of usually does in a lot of their cameras here. Nothing fancy. Same with the Leica Q343. I don't have any negative or positive feelings about this really, but you can see real simple once again. You can see the Sony's not using the typical battery that they use on their latest cameras. I've never seen this battery before in a Sony. It's really tiny actually. So I'm assuming the battery life isn't going to be as good as it is on the Leica. And you can see the Leica's battery is very interesting. So obviously I have this bottom brass plate on here, but I'm going to hit this little knob right there. And that's the battery. You can see how much more bigger that battery is. So very unique battery design on here. SD card is a separate door right here. Where on the Sony, the SD card was where the battery is at. But you can even see like the dials back here. This dial feels really plasticky. I have no clue if it's plastic or metal. Same with the top dials. It's they look metal, but then this one feels plastic, so I don't know. But then when you go to the Leica Q343, the dials, they feel so freaking high quality. They feel super robust. Again, everything, it just feels like quality on this Q343. To go in manual focus mode on the Sony, I'm assuming you have to go through the camera, through like the menu. You could probably do a quick button to change it, which is fine. You know, Sony's autofocus is so good that I don't even think, you know, I would ever put this in manual focus personally. Where on the Leica Q343, if you want to go into manual focus, there's this little knob right here and there's a button. So you just click that little button in and now you go into manual focus. So there's a lot of times I have to go to manual focus with the Q343 because the object tracking on here, it reminds me of exactly like my Lumix cameras where, you know, Sony has autofocus on lock in the market here. All right, guys, so I just put this into its macro mode and you'll see the autofocus works great. You can see it's floating on there. I could just put it back on the Leica logo right there. I could swivel it around and that tracking holds. So there we go. Let me take it out of the macro mode and I'll just show you guys like the random object tracking. You can see how the macro mode from this distance, it's a lot more. You can see even on the viewfinder window on the M11 there, it's even able to track that, then jump to the whole thing. Everything's still in focus there. So with random objects, Sony crushed it, and you guys are gonna see the Leica does not do that hot when it comes to random object trackings. When it comes to subject detection though, the Leica will hold up. So let's just try Sedona real quick. She's sitting in the Bronco right now because she was being too crazy and she still has a bad leg, but you can see that tracking doing great. It recognized it's a dog and it's going right onto her eye. So now we're on the Leica Q343. Let me put it into its macro mode and you're gonna see this is where the Leica starts to fall short. So we're on the Nikon logo and you can see it doesn't feel nearly as confident. It won't stay on the actual Nikon logo. You can see it does that pumping action. There it goes. We'll just get that right there. And then it starts, it's doing a little bit better than it was before, honestly. Then let's try the viewfinder window on the M11. All right, all of a sudden it wants to do better. When I was trying to do the test shots off camera, it wasn't holding the tracking as well. That's usually what it does. You see it's doing that pumping action. And then most of the times it likes to float off the object. It's doing a little bit, but it's actually doing way better than it usually does. But now let me go and put on the subject detection. So it sees her, but you can see it's not picking up her eye like the Sony did. But let me take a shot and then let's zoom in to see if it actually So this is usually what it does. It doesn't get her eye, but it'll get the tip of her nose. The Sony has it on lock still. Let's try that one. There you go. Now her eye's in. You guys can see how freaking crisp that is. So it's a little bit hit or miss, and that's kind of been my experience since owning this thing. We know Sony has the best autofocus. When it comes to Lumix and Leica cameras, they're very similar autofocusing systems. Usually on my Lumix and Leica cameras, when it comes to random objects like cameras and rings and jewelry and trees, whatever it is, the autofocus tracking just floats off and it gets distracted pretty much. It feels insecure almost. Where Sony, it's extremely confident, super sticky. Nikon's pretty close to Sony's autofocusing now. But then when it comes to subject detection, like faces and portraits and eye detection on humans, all the systems are crushing it now. But then when it comes to animal detection, Lumix is really caught up. There's like a Q343. As you guys saw, it was a little bit questionable. And then obviously Sony, it's just, they're still the number one in the autofocus game, but everybody's catching up. I know a lot of people are very romantic about compact form factor. This is a little bit too small for my taste personally. I understand, like, you know, if you want to put it in your purse, your man purse, or your Jinko size jean pockets, then sure, maybe it makes sense for you. But if I was to buy this, I would 1000% need a grip on this because this is almost impossible to hold. And even just, you know, having this in hand for the past hour, my hand feels like it's about to cramp up holding this. To where the Leica Q343, obviously have all these accessories on here, but you don't need these accessories on it. They have a little indentation back here so your thumb holds onto it. From there, the other thing that really stood out to me was the Viewfinder. The Viewfinder reminds me of exactly of my Sony a7C II. When I put my eye into this RX1R Mark III, I can feel my eye like squishing. It feels almost painful to look through it. And, you know, this is a personal issue. I don't think this is an issue with the camera. It's just the fact that the viewfinder is very tiny and the image quality is not that great in it. Especially, you know, if you've used any actual high-end camera like the Hasselblad X2D. I should have brought mine, I didn't bring it. The Nikon ZF viewfinder, you can see has this giant portal for your eyeball to go into there. The viewfinder on the Nikon ZF, when I put it onto my eye, it feels twice as big as the viewfinder feels on the RX. And again, this Nikon ZF, this isn't a fixed lens camera, but you know, this is a retro type camera, which I think a lot of people who are looking at this might look at the Sony. This is like half the cost or lower than the Sony though. And obviously, you know, way cheaper than the Leica. And then when I go and look at the Leica Q343 viewfinder, this thing feels huge. It pretty much feels like the Nikon ZF, but sharper. So I have no idea what the numbers are on viewfinders. My brain can't hold on to that type of information. But yeah, the Q343's viewfinder is definitely one of the best out of all these cameras here. And then when I go back to this, it's just, oh my God, this viewfinder feels like it's 5 or 10 years old compared to the viewfinder in the Leica Q343. So if this thing was like $3,500, I'd be like, oh, that's like a freaking still of a camera. I think a lot of people, if this was 35, would probably just get this instead of a Leica Q system. For the same price of $5,100 for this new Sony, you could go and find used Leica Q3s. You could find old Q2s as well. Lens hood that they made for the new Sony is it's like $200 or $300. They made a thumb grip for it too, and that thing's $300. So don't get it twisted. They are going after Leica Q people. But when it comes to Leica, you have very unique niche accessory people making accessories for the Q system. For instance, this is a brass little thumb grip here, and it's made exactly for the Q343. I have one on my Leica M11, and this one was made exactly for the Leica M11. And what's cool about it is, one, it's brass, but two, it has a little thumb grip that swivels out, which kind of, you know, resembles like a film rangefinder camera. From there, Analogous made me this custom anodized brass bottom plate. You could buy these brass bottom plates, but they're usually like shiny brass. So he like patinaed it up a little bit for me. So this bottom plate is full on brass, and he has a grip right here on it as well. So these accessories, you know, maybe they'll start making it for the new Sony if this does well, you know, because that's more money for them. Cool. But right now, all these accessories, you can only find these for Leica cameras. You can't find these for Fujifilms or any other camera pretty much. So again, when you get into the Leica ecosystem, you're getting into a totally different niche and crowd of people who really appreciate build quality and craftsmanship. From there, it is a fixed LCD screen. This LCD screen doesn't come out at all, which, you know, I don't find a big deal. if it was cheaper. But $5,100, I feel like it should have it. For the Leica Q343, we have the swivel out screen. It pops out, it could go down, it could go up, so you do top down shots. One issue for both of these cameras is, I mean, it's an upside. They both have leaf shutter. So if you're to put like an on-camera flash for that retro look, both of these cameras are going to crush it with that vibe, and you'll be able to use it all the way up to its max shutter speed of 1/2000. But that's what brings in the issue. That's the max shutter speed. So when shooting stuff like this, and you know, I like shooting wide open on everything. And it's hard to shoot wide open and stuff like this because I can't go to 1/4000 and 1/8000. And then electronic shutter, these both have pretty much the same sensor, which is a very slow sensor. So again, I'm not even gonna bother using the electronic shutter either, which also, it kills your dynamic range a little bit. So on my Leica Q343, also I'm probably out of focus, sorry, but I actually use the Polar Pro Everyday Short Staffs filter on here. These both have the same filter size. The Q343 has a 49mm and the new Sony also has a 49mm, but instead of putting the short stash filter on there, I'm gonna put on Polar Pro's latest filter. So this is their gold mist right here. They're calling this the 135 series because again, it's real subtle. This isn't about like caking on a bunch of diffusion. This is about creating like a really subtle filmic type look. Filmic meaning, you know, more throwback, softer vintage lens type of glow. Similar to like the Leica glow, I guess. So now before I get my final remarks, you know, who's this camera for? You know, at the price point, do I think this camera is worth $5,100? If you're somebody who is a diehard like Sony person and you only want to rock with Sony stuff and you've been dying for Sony to do, you know, their version of a Leica Q, yeah, sure, it's worth it for you. You know, the image quality that you're going to get out of this, it edges inspirational, where the Leica Q343 is just, every time I pick this camera up, it's just beyond inspiring. I know that Leica M11 is not really fair in this grouping, but this is the most inspiring camera. You know, I'm able to put, you know, this lens right here is from 1972. And when I shoot with this camera, it literally feels like shooting with film, but with the convenience of digital. You know, the really simple dial layout to where, you know, you're not going to have to get lost in the menus. Everything's there just for you to be a photographer and no thrills, nothing else. It's just the most streamlined, authentic process of being a photographer. But then compared to the Sony, you know, this thing feels the equivalent of the M11 compared to the new Sony, just because of how simple even the menus are on this compared to the Sony. You know, with this, you're still getting all the Sony menus and all that. So this is the part where people might think I'm kind of crazy. Again, if you're like a diehard Sony person, sure, the price point's not going to be an issue for you. But if you're somebody who's not, you know, you're not a loyalist to one brand and you're willing to spend $5,000 on a fixed lens camera, which, you know, logically, that makes no sense. Nobody needs to buy a freaking $5,000 fixed lens camera. That's pointless. These are pointless cameras. Unless you're a photographer who just loves doing photography. You're not hyper analyzing the spec sheets and the numbers and blah, blah, blah. You're looking more at, does it inspire you? Does it influence you? Does it make you want to pick it up and go out and shoot for the fuck of it for no reason at all? So for me, the price point on the Sony is not worth it. If this was like $3,500, honestly, I'd probably pick it up. Do I think the price point on this Leica is worth it? At the time when I bought it, again, I think I paid like $700 or $7,500 after taxes. To me, this camera is 1000% fucking worth it because it is truly inspiring. I get that simple photographer experience with all the Leica looks, with this incredible, stunning like lens that I've never used a lens like this before. And I don't think we'll ever be able to use a lens like this unless you get it paired up with this body, because the way it's designed, exactly like this thing. Just the way it feels in hand, the look of it, the look of the files, the way the lens and the sensor pair up together is just stunning. It is truly an inspiring camera to have. And I'm always going back and forth between this and my Leica M11 because I love both of them. I love my M11 a little bit more, honestly. But then this is, you know, it's right up there. It's close to it. So for me, this does move the needle enough for me to think if I'm willing to spend $5,000 or something like this, what's another $1,000 to $2,000 for this? It's the same thing with like my Bronco right behind me. I could have got the base model and I would have saved like $6,000, but I'm already spending fucking $50,000. So what's another $6,000 on top of $50,000 to get the one I've always wanted? You know, as I'm always saying, I'm not rich, I'm irresponsible. So don't listen to me because I'm bad with my finances. All right, guys, let's finally go through all the files. Sadly, there's no RAW support yet in Capture One or Lightroom. So we're gonna have to look at JPEGs. But before we go over the Sony, let's look at the Leica shots real quick. Obviously, we do have RAW support in here. These are pretty much the same sensors. So you're gonna get pretty much exactly the same image quality. Anybody who says, oh, color science this, color science that, if you're shooting a RAW, it doesn't give a fuck, because in RAW, you can make it look however you want. It's gonna be the same thing on the Sony. Now, when it comes to JPEGs and the built-in looks, personally, I only use built-in looks for inspo as I am shooting, because I rather look at something like this that has some character to it than boring old sterile true to life colors while I'm shooting. This is the Q343. You guys can see how incredibly sharp this lens is. This is truly mind-blowing. And you guys know me, I usually do not like sharp lenses. Now, what the Leica Q343 does incredibly well is, even though it's incredibly sharp, it still has a lot of character. So these are just some posts on my Instagram. You can see like a Q343, and I am using the short stash filter. You can still see how sharp it is, but you can see that 3D pop even on an Instagram screen recorded thing here on YouTube. You can see even on these shots, I caked on a lot of film grain, and you'll see when we go over the Sony shots, you can see how it's not perfectly round bokeh. As you start going into the edges, it starts kind of going a little bit oblong. Some people don't like that. Personally, for me, I absolutely love that, especially if you can hold the sharpness for everything else. But again, you can see into the edges here, the bokeh really starts distorting a little bit while still holding all the sharpness on whatever's in focus, even if you're on the edge of the frame here. This shot right here, you can see right behind her, the bokeh is incredibly creamy. And then as you go off to the edges, it starts getting a little bit more swirly. Here are some more shots here. I usually do not like sharpness, but for some reason, this lens doesn't feel sharp. It feels detailed, if that makes sense. Like skin texture doesn't feel like sandpaper, but whatever's in focus just pops off of the screen. It is truly an incredible lens. But again, you're paying over $7,000 for this. Now let's go through these Sony shots and see if it's capable of doing the same thing. Let's just start with how we're talking about how the bokeh kind of distorts going to the edges on the Leica. So I was just focusing on my busted fingernail right here just so we can get max bokeh. You see the bokeh balls in the back, they're perfectly round right here. But then if I move the camera over just slightly, you can see the bokeh that was more towards the center. Now that it's on the edge, it starts going a little bit oblong. So this is what's gonna, give you kind of that swirly vintage look while still being sharp. And then these guys ended up pulling up on these like really vintage little tiny dirt bikes. And I tried to grab a quick shot and the autofocus didn't get them. I don't even know what mode it was in. But again, these are JPEGs. They're straight out of camera. Like these actually look like, I'm actually really liking the colors out of this, which is a shocker because I've never once said the looks coming out of a Sony camera out of JPEGs were inspiring, but they're getting close with these new film looks on here. Again, sadly, these are JPEGs, but we're just going to try to do our best. You can see this lens does have a lot of sharpness, but it doesn't have that APO punch that the Leica had. So one more time, let's just go over the Leica shot here. This is a raw file from the Leica, so this isn't exactly fair, obviously. You can see those highlight details I was able to recover. You're gonna be able to do the same thing on the Sony, but you can see on the Leica here, you can see every little strand coming off of her. And even when you're zoomed out, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it through the screen recording on YouTube, but even zoomed out, it's like you can see every little particle of the hair. It is truly wild. And again, we're getting all that crazy sharpness without having to, boost sharpness at all in post, but you're still going to get that swirliness going into the frame. Back to the Sony again. I've owned a lot of Sony lenses, mainly either G Master zoom lenses and some of their prime lenses, and none of them have really moved me or inspired me. They've been great for commercial works. They just work and they get the job done and there's no thrills to them, but definitely it's an older Zeiss lens on it. I'm kind of happy they didn't update the lens on here because I like that this is a little bit older and it still has a little bit of character on there. This shot too, you can see, I don't know where the focus point was at on here, maybe around the screw area. We definitely have some chromatic aberrations where the Leica, I rarely see chromatic aberrations on that lens. But personally for me, I don't mind chromatic aberrations. Here's a close up. Again, I was just trying to see what the bokeh is going to look like. I really don't have any complaints with this lens. You can see as we go into the edges, we're getting a similar swirliness that we're getting on the Leica. Maybe not as buttery in the center as a Leica was, but still, you know, we're getting some character in here, especially for this being a Sony camera. So you can see this is the standard color profile. You know, it looks whatever, not inspiring at all. And then this is the film look 1. I think it has potential. It still kind of has like that clinical sterile look that Sony's always doing. I don't know what it is with Sony. I feel like, you know, they're, I don't know. I feel like they should shoot more film. This is film look 2. I don't care for this look at all. Film look 3, it could possibly have potential, but I'm not really loving it either. And then this is the Insta film look or instant film look, I think they're calling it. Now you can go in and start tuning the film look. If you guys want to know how I did this, just shoot a comment down below and in my follow-up video. This is the film look 1 straight out of camera. It was slowly starting to grow on me. So I was like, let me go make some tweaks. So this is after my tweaks. So, you know, we're edging some Fujifilm territory right here. I don't think it looks nearly as motivating or inspiring as Fujifilm film presets. And then this is also with stacking on, I think the Polar Pro Gold Mist filter. If you go in with that film look 1, you can start making some adjustments and then adding some diffusion and you know, you're going to be able to, you know, finally get some motivating looks out of a Sony camera for once. But yeah, again, I'm going to try to do a photo shoot this camera and push it more and really see if I like it or not. You know, I think if there's more accessories for this that were more, you know, niche Leica type accessories, I think this camera would grow on me. I can imagine a future where I was like, I think I'm going to pick one up because I have this circumstance where, you know, I'm finding out that I need something like this. All right. So now that we went through everything, I have a little bit advice for Sony. We know you can make perfect everything. We know that you guys are one of the best of the best. We know that you guys are the top dog. But the way that the industry is going, where, you know, jobs are being diminished through AI, the economy, just a forever changing landscape and everybody fighting for, you know, chasing down to the bottom dollar. In the near future here, people aren't going to be buying cameras purely for, you know, the best of the best, the clinical perfection, and what's going to book you the most work. I have a feeling there's going to be a huge shift of people looking for cameras that can inspire and push them to go out and shoot for fun, for the hell of it, for no reason at all. And it's not going to be about, oh, let me get perfect edge-to-edge sharpness. Let me get one of the best sensors and yada, yada, yada. I think people are going to go for what's going to help me create images to where when I look at them, I am moved emotionally. And when it comes to that, you know, emotions have nothing to do with tech specs and edge-to-edge sharpness and perfection. It all has to do, you know, when we look at that image, what kind of nostalgia it brings up, what kind of art it brings up, what kind of painterly images it brings up, what kind of unique standout look does it create. And with that, that also comes down to the body. Again, I think in the near future, people are going to start hating and kind of despising computers in their hand. And I think they're going to start gravitating more towards a more human experience. And to me, you know, this camera is metal, but at the same time, it somehow still kind of feels plasticky. Maybe that's just the way, I don't know. For instance, my Leica M11, this thing's made out of a chunk of brass. It has a glossy black paint to it. Over time, it's got patina and some of that brass will come out. To me, there's something human to it. There's something raw, something authentic. There's something real to that. And when I put it in my hands, it motivates me to shoot. You know, I am learning with age that I am on the spectrum. I'm just coming to terms with that, and that's kind of becoming my reality here. And so for me, you know, that is a kind of important thing, the way something feels in my hand and the way, you know, it looks and feels. With that said, I don't think there's anything wrong with this lens. I actually think the character on this lens, as we went over, is actually beautiful, especially coming from Sony. Because again, we're used to Sony just being perfect. And so there is some character and charm to this lens. So I don't have any gripes with it, actually. And I think that's what's the most important, you know, if you're buying a camera. You know, have fun with it. Be creative. That's what this is now. At this price point, no one needs a fixed lens camera. Like, no one's going to go rush out there to you know, to get this to make work or to book work. This is purely for inspiration. This is a luxury to own. So go for luxury. Go all out. That's it. Got a cool dirt bike. Let's see if I can capture it. Just a dirt bike and autofocus.